Well, hello and welcome to the Gooner Fanzine Arsenal Women podcast. We're at the end of the international break. It's another 12 o'clock kickoff to look forward to this weekend. Leicester City away. Incidentally, I put a tweet out saying, I felt Arsenal had been quite hard done by with 12 o'clock kickoffs, Daisy. Someone replied to Arsenal will have 6 out of 11 by the end of the first half of the season. Leicester will have had 10 out of 11 with the only other one being an 11:55. I mean, what's going on?
It's a real problem, and I read a piece about it about the 12 o'clock kickoffs because I was just somebody asked me the other day what time is the game on, and I said probably 12 o'clock because this is what it is at the moment. It's a big problem, and I was actually interested to read the report that said that most people, I think it was like a very high percentage of
Mhm.
those that they surveyed were saying then they're not happy with the changes that are made. I think it's the big consideration for them has been promoting broadcasting and the improvement in broadcasting with no consideration to those who are actually going to the game. And that has been the discourse on social media this week. It's what about those people that are having to go? I think Everton was the recent one, obviously announced 2 Saturdays, both 12 o'clock, one at the Emirates, one away. But away in Liverpool at Everton, great as it is for me to get to go for me as a Northern fan to get to go to an away day and a 12 o'clock kickoff quite nice. For those who are traveling, from from North London and from that area, that is just another one. I just don't understand it. And I also think there's been so much talk, I think, in the Premier League about 12 o'clock kickoffs actually affecting performance and how, 12 o'clock kickoffs you don't necessarily do as well in those games. So I'm actually it is quite frustrating to see. I don't know if there's an impact necessarily yet to conclude in the WSL of whether 12 o'clock kickoffs are impacting results, but it is frustrating, and especially for those travelling fans. And Arsenal have some of the most committed travelling fans who found a way to be there, but you can't help but feel like it's only being considered in terms of broadcasting at this point.
Yeah, and I think there's a part of me that thinks this is just going to be it for the rest of the season. And I think there's not probably a lot the broadcasters can do when these slots are announced. I don't really have a lot of knowledge of this, but I don't think they can just turn around in December and January and say, well, we're sacking off the 12 o'clock kickoffs. We're going to go back to 6:40. I think this is it. I think we are stuck with these for the rest of the season. But like from the social media content I've seen, the players don't like them, and that's probably hardly surprising. It's not. Football in the UK has been built around 3 o'clock kickoffs for hundreds of years. Later is strange, earlier is strange, and I think that 3 hours earlier than that, players are getting to games at 10:30 in the morning, which you're only sort of used to when you're a grassroots player. And there is the issue that these girls who want to play grassroots football up and down the country, and boys who are getting into women's football as well, you're not only not going to make the game, but if you're playing, you can't watch it as well. So then again, that further harms the TV figures. Are you going to have little girls saying to your mum, can I get Sky Sports? Can we watch these games on the TV? Because if they're going to say, well, you're playing football every other weekend, then it's not going to be worth it there. So I don't know, unless there's the TV figures are telling us something we don't know. But I think my whole argument is that Sundays are so full of men's football on TV anyway that you can't move around it unless you literally were to kick off at 9 in the morning. 12 o'clock this Sunday, for example, it's Hearts v Celtic, massive game in the Scottish Premier League, the Scottish Premiership. The Hearts won in the end, sort of top of the table game. So if that's on and there's it's that, but or four on WSL multi-view, I think fans of the men's game are probably still going to be in the same place. You're never going to get away from the rest of them, and I don't know, Izzy. It just feels like there's that feeling of annoyance every time these sort of rescheduled games come out, and that can't be a good thing long term.
Yeah, I think it's clearly a problem, and as you've said, the players have talked about it, the fans have talked about it, the media's talked about it. It's just the league we're waiting to see what they have to say about it. But it's really disappointing because, of course, they want these huge broadcast deals, and if that's the deal they've got in place, then as you said, I think we probably are stuck with it for the rest of the season. But they're going to have to really look at it next year because it clearly doesn't work. But I think even, speaking as a journalist, it's really difficult because if there's four matches on at 12 o'clock on a Sunday, yes, you want to watch the men's games as well, but you've got to have Sky Sports multi-view to watch all four of those. So you've got to have a big enough screen to do that. You can't then kind of have that half on your laptop and write about half. It's kind of impossible to get the bigger picture of what's going on in the WSL each weekend. It used to be so nice. You'd have your whole Sunday or your Saturday set out, in a late kickoff and mid-afternoon, lunchtime, and you could really, if it's a horrible day outside, you could cozy up and watch a lot of WSL football. But yeah, it's a real shame because it's clearly not working. I don't enjoy it. If we want to go and work at a game, we've got to be there at 10 o'clock as well. It's so hard for the away journalists, for example, to get there down to London and fans to get away. It's just, yeah, they've clearly not really thought about the clientele and the fans that they're trying to get into the stadiums. And I think the attendances have seen a little bit of an effect because of it. People are saying the attendances are down. It's got to be something to do with this, in part at least.
Yeah, Izzy, you mentioned it being tough for journalists as well. And, Susie, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing, she literally messaged me yesterday saying, I don't think I can get to Everton now because fair enough. I think it's probably even for fans. There's a bit of an underestimation. Fans like to get to games early. I'm someone if I can, even if I'm a fan, I'm nudging my mate and saying, "Do we have to be there just before kickoff? Can we go for a drink earlier? Can we be in the ground? Can we soak up the atmosphere?" It's as a journalist, you want to be there at least 2 hours before kickoff, and that again looks like at 9:30, 10 on a Saturday or a Sunday, not ideal travel wise. And also, I think the TV situation, if you do have an early game, it's really nice to cover it and then go back and watch, say, the late one in the WSL, like you were saying, in terms of spacing them over the day. If you're out at one, you're missing everything because they are all on at the same time. And I don't know, there seems to be a lot of talk about people our age have less attention spans and in terms of how we're going to shape football. But I don't know how 4 games at the same time is great for people's attention spans either. I don't know. There's going to be some research there, and I noticed for the Premier League in terms of the men's stuff, they had 4 games on at 2 last Sunday, and they trialed a multi-view for that. So maybe this is just the way things are going. So yeah, we'll see. Arsenal Women's Supporters Club actually tweeted about this, said the 12 p.m. kickoffs have been really challenging for us. A huge part of our growth has come from building the community around the pre-match experience, and much of our effort goes into creating something special for away fans, for away fixtures. These times don't help anyone. And Daisy, you've been a part of that in terms of the pre-match walks, the meetups and everything. I mean, some might argue on a Saturday, then you've got the rest of the day to spend after the game, but it seems that before the game is the real time where actually a lot of the brilliant sort of community stuff happens.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fan walks are a huge aspect, and that's been arranged with the club, not just with the supporters club, but obviously with Arsenal as well, whether that's away or at home. And if we're looking at the Emirates, like big relationships have been built even with the pubs in the local area, like coming to them before, coming to them after. Obviously after is great, but not everybody has that. And I think if you're looking at really, we did a podcast a few weeks back now, maybe even months, about new fans. New fans tend to come before the game. They tend to want to meet new people, and that's when we build those new relationships and we build those new people into the supporters club more than it is after the game. So I think that's a huge aspect of it as well. So it's again, it's a bit selfish in a way because it's not considering those fans and what we're trying to build. And if you're trying to replicate that across all the WSL clubs, as we've been emphasising beyond Arsenal, to build those fan connections and stuff, to have those 12 o'clock kickoffs, whether that's at home or even away, it's difficult to do that. So I do really feel for those who are putting the work in behind the scenes, because it does feel like they're not being considered in this, and the real people that are trying to win is those who are trying to make money off the broadcasting, or rather than it is those who are travelling and actually coming to watch their team on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see an amazing sort of TV stat to justify it. And, I'd have to sort of speak to certain people to find out about that. But that's the only winner here, really. You don't really hear people saying, "Oh, I've been watching more WSL this season because of the early kickoff times." It just doesn't happen. And yeah, it's one to keep an eye on. But quite interesting to me that Arsenal, sort of as one of the top sides in the WSL, haven't had as many as a team lower down like Leicester, which is maybe suggesting that sort of the standalone kickoff times are almost not the 12 o'clock, and the 12 o'clock are almost like the 3 o'clock in the men's game, where they just put some of the sort of traditionally non-broadcasted games together, and then cement sort of teams like Leicester maybe don't get as much of the spotlight. What I would say is Sky having an hour of build-up before these is a massive step. I'm really enjoying that sort of that perspective of the coverage, of being able to actually, if you want to get the build-up, it's just like the men's game. And I think maybe this is where something the BBC could do a bit more, is actually really giving it a bit more of a build-up, a bit more tactical analysis, because I think, Izzy, there's a lot, I cover a lot of women's cricket, and I think there is still a bit of a gap in the coverage about, if you really want to go into the tactical side, maybe we're not quite there in terms of being level with the men's game yet.
I mean, yeah, definitely not. It's been I definitely noticed it in the Champions League as well last season. You know, a lot of the games that are being broadcast for free on DAZN and even the TNT ones, you're thrown in at the first whistle, and there's no build up before maybe 5 minutes if you're lucky with the commentators, and then half time there's no analysis, and then post match there's no analysis, and you're lucky to just get a couple of interviews with the managers and the players who are there. But it's just, yeah, I think it's so important, and it really helps people to learn about the game. I certainly like watching men's football. I'll sit through if it's a match with two teams that maybe is not Arsenal, or it's a team I don't support or I haven't watched before. You mentioned the Scottish Premiership there, Freddie, for example. If you're watching something you're not familiar with, you really need that kind of post-match debrief to understand who the players are, who the manager is, what the dynamics are. And it's so important, and it really brings people into the game, especially those who aren't able to get there, who are home watching every week and for various reasons. And so it just means that everyone feels involved, and you get the whole picture of the day, you get a bit more atmosphere. And so I think it's a real shame if the TV channels aren't able to give that same dedication to the women's matches as they are to the men's. We were talking about before we came on about data available about players in different leagues, and it's great to see that there was the first FA Cup first round game being broadcast on TNT, and that's a step in the right direction, kind of giving these teams the coverage they deserve. But you're right there about Leicester. If they're having all these 12 o'clock kickoffs, then they're being thrown in the multi-view, and people aren't going to maybe kind of gravitate towards watching those games if there's something a little bit more exciting or a bit more of a closer contest on. So it's definitely something that needs to be looked at for so many different reasons that we've mentioned.
Yeah, really interesting, and definitely one to keep an eye on. Almost one I'd quite like to ask players about, but you sort of know you'd probably get the flat back response. But as I say, I can imagine. I'm not sure it's massively popular with them, sort of the staff either. We'll move on to talk about the international break and some really sad news. I'm sure all of you who are watching or listening have seen Michelle Agyemang will miss at least the rest of the season with a ruptured anterior cruciate ligament injury. She's on loan at Brighton, of course. Arsenal had news goalkeeper Manu Zinsberger suffered a similar injury, will also be out for a very long time, unfortunately. I mean, it is almost a year unless you get sort of very lucky. And for players like Sam Kerr, when you're not wanting to rush back, it can be even more. Daisy, were you at Pride Park? Because this just, I mean, even from the press box, I hate to say it, I knew straight away.
Yeah, we really did know, and I was sat behind the goal at one end, and to be honest, compared to I went to the previous game as well in Manchester and watched Brazil. Compared to that, obviously both friendlies. I really enjoyed the game from the start. If we go back to when the game started, great goal from Beaver Jones. Set the tone, and I thought. I don't know what it is about Australia, but it does kind of feel like a bit of a rivalry in a way. We do want to really beat them, and I think it was Ella Toon who said before the game it might be a friendly, but there's nothing friendly about it in a way because we really want to win. And I kind of felt that passion when that first goal went in, really celebrated, and I thought England were playing some great football and cheered. I'd managed to actually pick up, and I don't know if this is sort of a little bit sad and a bit more sad than it was when I first got it, but my sister picked up an Agyemang scarf at the Brazil game in Manchester. The first time I'd ever seen sort of different England players on the scarves. You could get Beaver Jones, Agyemang, all these players that you don't usually see. So we were great to see that, and she let me borrow it for the game. So I took my Agyemang scarf, and I thought, seeing her come on, what a Euros and the summer we had, and what a summer she had, and getting to see her, and as much as she's obviously on loan at Brighton, I still kind of view her as an Arsenal player in every way because she's sort of Hale End in every way, and I love that. But yeah, that was disappointing and sad, we talked about this, I think, maybe last week or the week before, the crisis that is happening with ACL injuries. I think we talked about it a few seasons back when we saw four players for Arsenal out for most of the season, and we really suffered with an injury crisis. And as you see it reflecting now across leagues, players coming back from injury, ACL injuries, and then getting another, it's just, you can't even put it into words, and you can't describe it because you knew, like you said, you knew straight away what it was going to be. The way she went down, no contact. you almost can't believe that it's happening. I really did think this was an opportunity for her. We've even talked last week about bringing her back in January
Yeah,
and
yeah.
seeing her fit into this Arsenal side and how she. I even spoke during the game before the injury. Maybe we'll bring her back and she'll bring some physicality to Arsenal and she'll impact the rest of the season. And in my piece, I was going to touch on before I actually published it and the game happened, how she might actually impact Arsenal's block going into the new year and how we look at the second half of the season. And now to see this happen, and it's heartbreaking. It's happening too often, and is enough being done? I'm not sure, but it really is gutting, and we wish her obviously the best in her recovery. And yeah, it's happening too often, and it's a shame to see at this point.
Yeah, I mean, lovely reception when she came on.
Yeah,
Amazing. I've had people sort of who I wouldn't think really follow the women's game texting me saying, "Oh, I really hope Agyemang's okay." The last couple of days, and I think that just shows how well known she's become. Almost overnight with her Euros performance. And this was the season where we all know she needed regular football. It was a really hard decision for Arsenal to send her on loan to Brighton. She's been doing well there, by all accounts, scored a couple of goals. She is playing regularly. Rosa Kafaji's there as well. And, for Arsenal, their dream would have been a very good season, regular football, Izzy, and then coming back and trying to hit the ground running with Arsenal. This is a real setback for her now.
Yeah, it's a huge setback, and it's just possibly the worst. I mean, there's never a good time to have this injury, as we know, and it's just extremely devastating to anyone who suffers it. But just for her, it's just so upsetting to come off the back of that incredible summer, and as you said, be looking at such a bright future and a bright season. Obviously, she's still got years and years ahead of her, but she was looking at this season, and it was maybe going to be her breakout in the WSL. She was just starting to really find her form with Brighton, and it's just, yeah, it's incredibly bad timing, and I really feel for her and her family, and yeah, it's so difficult. I mean, you've just got to hope that she's able to have this amazing team around her to support her during her recovery and come back stronger. But it's just a real setback in her career. She's just broken into this England side at such a young age, and she's become a bit of a hero for the nation. And same as you, Freddie, I've had a couple of texts from friends today that were fans, became fans in the Euros, but maybe don't keep up with the game, saying, "I feel so sad for Michelle Agyemang," and it's true. She really captured everyone's hearts, and I think that a lot of people who maybe, as you said, don't tune in, they'll feel this as well. So, yeah, I really hope that she's okay and that she's feeling strong. We don't know whether she'll be back at Arsenal to do her recovery. Obviously, they're very used to that injury, which is a shame. But we'll have to see what unfolds.
Yeah, the statement earlier from Brighton, Michelle will miss the remainder of the season. We are in contact with her parent club, Arsenal, and will work together to determine a treatment and rehabilitation program for Michelle. I'd imagine she returns to Arsenal anyway. I think also, with unfortunately the sad fact that Manu Zinsberg has also done hers not long ago, I probably think, we saw with sort of Mead and Marvin Reuter actually having each other to go along that journey. I think that may well play a part with it. And as you mentioned, I think Agyemang, I think we saw every interview in the Euros how incredibly mature and sort of grounded she is. Really sort of a really impressive young individual, and she's got very good people around her. She's very focused. I mean, it's difficult for anyone, but yeah, we wish her all the best. It was just that press conference with Serena Wiegman when we said it almost just the fact she was refusing to say ACL, but we all knew what she was hinting at. It was, I've been at too many games now where these injuries have happened, and this is almost one of the most obvious ones, just because of how she stretched the leg, and it was, yeah, it's horrible to see, and we wish her all the best. England beat Australia after losing to Brazil. I've got to start with Taylor Hines. I thought she was outstanding, Daisy. I mean, probably a full debut against Leon, her first start even, was a little bit, thrown into the fire. But I know Australia had 10 players, but she was up against Ellie Carpenter, wasn't she, for 90 minutes? Well, for 60, I think she came off in the second half. I thought she was outstanding.
Yeah, really positive performance. I think you touched on the fact that when she started against Leon, that was a tough game to throw her in at the deep end. And we talked about this on the podcast because Leon probably have one of the best attacks, if not the best attack in Europe. The players that they have, For Renee to trust her in that was a huge sign, and we know Renee doesn't trust squad depth so often. So to see that was obviously a huge belief in her abilities, and she proved that. I mean, it was tough for her in that game, but I still think under the circumstances she did well. I've always kind of appreciated her as a player and thought she'd gone under the radar even when before she was at Arsenal and when she was leading obviously at Liverpool. But to see her back, and I've talked about my recent piece, I think it's hugely positive for Arsenal to have these problems of having two left backs. I mean, Katie McCabe, but we might touch on it, but had a great international break as well. And I want Arsenal to have these problems, and I don't think you need to look at it as a bad thing that we have two left backs that are really, really strong in their position, that are pushing, performing well, have a case to make to start those games. But yeah, in that game, against Derby, I thought a change back line for England, who had struggled against Brazil, to see players playing in their natural positions obviously has some advantage. It's not a dig at Serena Wiegman, because I think, even in Brazil, I can understand why she did that and why she's pushing for players to play different positions when she hasn't got the depth that she needs in at right back. But to see our left back, obviously Taylor Hines starting and then Niamh Charles coming on, it's great. But yeah, full of it seemed like she's full of fire at the minute. The tackles that she was putting in, I love when players kind of go in with slide tackles and really rough challenges, even if it's a friendly, because it kind of shows where their mindset is at. And I've been talking so much about mindset going into this next block for Arsenal. If we have players like Taylor Hines, true leader, leading by example, hopefully a little bit more vocal as well, and putting in tackles like that, it really sets the tone for the games. And it might be sort of Leicester away, but we're going into tougher games after that where we need that firepower and we need those players who are actually going to say, you know what, doesn't matter who we're playing, we're going to put everything in and we're going to perform. And it really puts pressure as well on players, which I think competition is great because it encourages players to perform better.
Mm. Yeah, Steph Catley played at left back for Australia. I thought Winnie Heatley played quite well
Mm.
for them actually at centre back, and you can see probably why Catley was at left back. But Hines really impressed me. There was one where Carpenter sort of burst into the England half, I think in the first half, and Hines sort of stayed with her for pace the whole way, and as you said, put in a really good sliding tackle. And I just thought, I mean, there are a few Arsenal v Arsenal, but then also Arsenal v Chelsea battles out there, and my mind is already very much on that Chelsea game, almost more so than Leicester. And like you say, Katie McCabe was great, but just little matchups like that, Izzy, might well get Renee thinking.
I mean, you'd hope so. I'm sure Renee had a very busy international break, watching all of her players out, and probably managed to watch more games than we could. But I think, yeah, she's got to look at these players, and she's got to look at the fact that they've had these matchups and how it's gone, because that's proof, isn't it? That's proof that it's worked. It's worked for England, and if those players can do it on an international stage, then I'm sure they can do it on a club stage as well. So you've really got to hope that Renee Segers is going to kind of look at her team, look back at that block and go, that really wasn't our best work, not the team's best performances across the board. It really was a kind of just get to the end of it and move on. And let's move on well. Let's get Leicester under the belt. It's a good way to warm up. At least we're not going straight into Chelsea, which is fantastic. But then moving into Chelsea full focus, and it looks like they're putting full focus on all the marketing and getting people there, and they're going to really want a big performance, and that Emirates hasn't maybe been a fortress for Arsenal this season as it has been in previous years. So they've got to look at the performance on the pitch, and they've really got to get it together, and yeah, I think it starts with the team selection.
Yeah, press conference for Renee Friday. There's sort of no alarming injury doubts. I think the question will be when Leah Williamson comes back, but obviously Olivia Smith withdrew, Lotta Wibben-Moy withdrew due to illness, Katie Reid a little groin injury. I'm going to forget some as well. But it's been Annika Borba, her illness as well. So illness, I think you can sort of cast aside unless it's anything worse. But there's a couple. I think Olivia Smith, Daisy, certainly. This was one of those international breaks where Arsenal just didn't want people to get injured, and luckily the likes of sort of Ford, Catley, Cooney Cross all came through as well, because it's been a bit of a damaging one actually in terms of injuries. And obviously Agyemang is a Brighton player, but just the players withdrawing, it's been get them home, get them wrapped in cotton wool.
Yeah, definitely. The last thing Arsenal want going into this block is more injuries. I talked about the Benfica game a lot because I think it showed glimpses of what Arsenal could do tactically. But then to see Emily Fox go down, Steph Catley go down at the end of the game, and players having to come on, it was really a concern. Biggest concern, obviously, Olivia Smith. What a talented player, really gutting for her because she had an opportunity to really prove herself going into this international break. But hopefully it's not as bad as it seemed at the start. It can be kind of heart in your mouth moment as it was obviously with Agyemang as well, even though she's not an Arsenal player. You see these players and you think you really don't want it to be a serious injury, but Arsenal don't need interruption, they don't need disruption, they don't need that kind of thing going into this block. They need concentration, they need mindset, they need focus. And I'm hoping it's not as bad as it seems, but we've heard little about Olivia Smith since they said she was returning to Arsenal.
Mm.
So it's one of those ones where you've kind of got to hold your breath and see. But I did see glimpses of players like Chloe Kelly, Beth Mead that I really liked as well, like not all negative in any way. And Arsenal do have that squad depth more than I think people realise. Rely on these players more than you think you can. So it's not all negative. We used to be thinking, oh, we're going to have to play somebody out of position to fill this gap. Now we don't have that problem as much, and I'm excited to see the likes of Kyra hopefully continue to get games and other players as well. So lots to look forward to in a way. But yeah, hopefully those injuries are not as bad as they seem when we see these players returning quite quickly.
Yeah, I didn't think Australia were great against Wales, and then I mean the red cards killed her. Milana Kennedy, I've watched her twice this season. She's been appalling in both of the games. London
Mm.
City against Arsenal, I thought she was really poor, and then the Cruyff turn. So I was shocked she played in midfield anyway, because I thought she's just a centre back. So that was a bit of a bemusing decision from Joe Montemuro. Nice to see him, but it just meant we couldn't really get a good look at Kyra Cooney-Cross in the 10, which I was quite looking forward to. Not a lot for Caitlin Ford to do as well. Sam Kerr's livening up just in time. We know she loves a goal against Arsenal, but yeah, it was a bit frustrating for the Matildas in terms of just that red card sort of killed the friendly. Anything else that caught your eye, Izzy? I mean, great result for Ireland, and those Katie McCabe 2 goals. It was debate whether it was a hat trick. She said herself it wasn't, but I mean that's some result because Belgium aren't a bad side, as we know.
Yeah, I'm surprised she said herself that it wasn't a hat trick because I feel like it's sort of quite her on brand for her to just claim it and go with it. And it was also her 100th cap for Ireland, which is pretty impressive as well. Um, but yeah, I think, they've won promotion up to, is it called the A League or is it,
League
yeah?
A, yeah.
League A, there you go. Which might help them out when they're trying to qualify for another World Cup, which we've seen them do before, and I'm sure they'll be completely determined to do again. But yeah, I don't think anything else particularly caught my eye. Um, it just I think England needed that result after the Brazil game. They needed to get a win, and I think that maybe the attendance caught my eye. Actually, it seemed like it was a really good atmosphere at Pride Park. You were both there. I watched it on TV. I think that's a great size stadium for the Lionesses. Obviously, they can sell out bigger, but the noise from the crowd, I think that's what they needed to have a bit of a boost, end it on a positive note. And there's only a couple of weeks really until the next break anyway. So yeah, pleased that most people got through unscathed, and we'll see what this block has to offer.
Mm. Just finally, then, thoughts from both of you. We'll start with you, Daisy. Leicester, not always an easy place to go. It was that 6-2 win 2 seasons ago, a very scrappy 1-0 last season. That was one of those where it sort of really convinced me that Jonas Eidevall wasn't going to be there much longer. I mean, they've picked up a couple of decent results at home of Leicester City. They're always a sort of a bit of a low block. They can struggle to score goals. This could be one where it could be difficult for Arsenal, but like Izzy said, it's when you just want to get over the line and get playing your football before Chelsea. Because I think if you lose to Chelsea, I think that's the title there. So it's a huge month coming up.
Yeah, it's a massive game, and as much as it is on paper an easier opponent, as I said, nothing is an easy game for Arsenal at the minute, and it kind of sets the tone really if we go into that game and we get the result, whether that's a 5-0 win or a 1-0 win. As we said, 3 points and a positive performance is what we're looking for, and that will set the sort of tone for Chelsea, Bayern, other games that we've got coming up, the derby, obviously North London derby coming up as well. So it's not necessarily on paper a make or break game for the season, but it does set the tone for the rest of the block. And I know Renee's looking at it a lot in blocks. I think she's only mentioned that about a million times in the press conferences that she looks at everything as a block, and that's how she considers things. And if it works for her, then that's what works. mistakes. But yeah, we're looking for a positive performance, and no disrespect to Leicester as well, because they've taken Chelsea to a lot of games as well. I think there's a
Mm.
draw that I watched where Chelsea very much could have lost that game. I think that was last season. There's been a few games where it's been tight for them, but they haven't had probably the best of starts to the season. They had a few difficult fixtures that have not gone their way. People looking at them as relegation contenders. But if Arsenal don't know what to like, what they usually do, they tend to put us under pressure in these kind of games. So what would be really nice is if they don't put us under pressure and we kind of get through it, and not have to be sort of nervy to the end like we were at the Brighton games. That's what I would say is would be a big sort of positive movement in terms of progress for Renee Slagers.
Yeah, ninth Leicester. So, I mean,
Mm,
Liverpool and West Ham have been appalling. I think
mm.
Liverpool probably should have more criticism because of the fact their men's team won the Premier League and the fact they're just not performing in the WSL the last few seasons. Leicester above Everton, which I don't think many of people would have expected at the start of the season. Rick Passmore became their permanent manager rather than interim. So, the King Power, and then Izzy. We'll preview Chelsea in more depth next week. But anything you're hoping to see in particular on Sunday?
Yeah, look, I think I was going to say almost Arsenal women need to take a leaf out of Arsenal men's book, which is not something that we've said in the last couple of seasons. Maybe it's been the other way round. Um, but look how they are so consistent at the back, not conceded in
Mm.
however many games, and whether it's 1-0 and it's not particularly kind of exciting football, they're getting the job done. They're really near an eye on impossible to beat at the moment. And that's what women need to do. They need to make themselves that kind of scary opponent. And I don't think right now or at the end of that block, I'm turning into Renee Slegers talking about blocks, but I've listened to her too many times. I don't think that they were a particularly threatening opponent at the end of the last set of matches because they were having such shaky performances. So it'll be really good to see them come back, a bit of firepower, and just look really solid. That's what I want to see. Not shaky, not nervous, and yeah, everyone across the board just doing their job and getting on with it. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but it's got to be a positive result for me before that Chelsea game.
Yeah, low blocks, high blocks, mid blocks, blocks of
And
fixtures,
some
blocks on
goals from set
Twitter.
pieces.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, set
that
piece
is
goal.
that is one to watch out for, I think, set pieces, because you look at the men's side, top of the league, maybe not playing amazingly, but getting the job done with set pieces. Yeah, it's one to watch. Daisy, you will not be there at the King Power, the 12 o'clock kickoff, and I'll see you both then for next week for the Chelsea game.
That's the big one, isn't it? That's the one on our
Yeah.
minds.
Yeah, and Arsenal, somehow it's Arsenal versus second place Sunderland that afternoon as well at 5:30. So
Yeah.
that I'll take that for scheduling, Izzy, to be fair,
Yeah.
because I know where we'll be.
I'm so excited. Exactly. I know where we'll be, and yeah, Sunderland are always an exciting team to watch as well. So yeah, we'll see how that afternoon plays out. Hopefully, a double win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, full coverage to come from probably quite a bleary-eyed reporter because I've got a game on Saturday as well. Sunday, 12 o'clock kickoff. We'll have our full Gooner fanzine coverage.